Welcome back, everyone, to Institute of Liberal Values book club discussion on empowered humanity theory with Jason Littlefield. I'm Diana Blum. We've got Wink Twyman and Xander Keeg, and very own Jason Littlefield is joining us today to talk a little bit more about what inspired him to write this book, the work that, he's been doing that actually cultivated a lot of the wisdom that's in this book, and for us to ask some questions that over the last three sessions have brought up that we've brought up for Jason to comment. So a quick recap. The first session was just a little bit of background explaining the field of neuroscience and well-being and what it means to be dysregulated, and what, how is our primitive brain connected to our higher cortical thinking brain. Part two was actually more about the value-centered dignity lens, the curiosity component where we're compassionate inquiry is engaged. And then part three was about the practices. So here we are in part four, and Jason Littlefield is here with us. So I'm going to hand it over to you to give a little bit of background on what inspired this work.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm quite honored and very grateful for this series and listening to your conversations about empowered humanity theory. And I took a few notes and I look forward to discussing those with you all today. One of the first things that really got stuck, I guess, got my attention was when you noticed what the children were being taught. And through that neuroscientist lens of the neuroplasticity, like, oh, they're being taught these awful things, so their brains are being wired and geared into this direction. That was one of the first things that really caught my attention and made me start searching for ways to do this work better from a neuroscience lens that was, I guess, supportive of brain health rather than detrimental to brain health. So I found it interesting that you too, that was one of the things that caught your attention. And then the next thing was, when you asked, are we past the ability for this work to make a difference? Or is this work exactly what is needed for this moment? And I felt your frustration, and we you and I have had conversations the past few years where we've both felt frustrated in the ability to get empowered humanity theory beyond the noise. And honestly, it was my, I guess, frustration that inspired this book because I had been trying to address the inconvenient truths about the ideas that this generation is advancing and institutionalizing, and how it is detrimental to human flourishing from essentially 2017, uh, until now, but steadily until 2023, 2024. And I realize I'll talk more about what happened later, but it was just that frustration where I just kind of gave up, if you will, started focusing on my health and happiness and well-being. And then a few months later, it started gnawing at me. I was like, well, we're not listening now. It's difficult to have conversations now. I said, but one day there will be enough people wanting to do something different, wanting to bring people together, wanting to build us up. So I want to be ready for that. I want to be a voice or an inspiration to perhaps a future generation. And honestly, it was that surrendering, no longer having to worry about, okay, what can I say? How can I say it this time so that people will understand? But just that surrendering and my writing process, I didn't. I have a love-hate relationship with the writing process. I'm not a writer. I didn't write this book because I wanted to write a book. I wrote this book because there's an idea that could really help us all out. But I entered the flow state almost every time I uh, was going to say sat down to write, but I don't sit down. I stand up. But whenever my fingers hit the keyboard, I would set my alarm, pardon me, for about 3:30 to 4 in the morning, so I would write before I would go to work. And I had never had words just pour out of me like that. So that was the writing process and what was behind the writing process and the realization of, oh wow, we're teaching our children and really the future of humans to behave in ways that are accelerating those tribalism and fear and our susceptibility to groupthink, which is basically our three most vulnerabilities as human beings. Those were the things that society is strengthening now. So, really, empowered humanity theory is the complete 180 counter of those ideas. And I'll stop right there in case somebody wants to chime in before I move forward.
Well, I'm actually curious how practically this is incorporated into the classroom from your vision, right? Because we briefly touched on how this the neuroscience is actually being manipulated in the classroom to drive behaviors based on some ideological agenda, as opposed to helping the individual child improve, find personal agency, improve themselves. So how do you counter the current movement in the schools with your approach? Because my understanding is you do have some experience now working in the public schools using empowered humanity theory.
Well, with I guess exposure and understanding of empowered humanity theory, especially that dignity lens, where we are focusing on our commonalities, where we are n not seeing each other as an other, not competing with others for power and resources. So it's just a mindset shift. And people are responding to it well. At least the school district that I'm currently working with, because
Right.
they understand that it's, well, I primarily have my work geared toward the adults, and caring for the adults in our system so that they can transfer those skills and attitudes and practices down toward to the children, in really a meaningful and authentic way without a scripted curriculum.
Right. So if you had to, I guess, summarize the main difference of when you were just a, SEL specialist and being forced to do kind of the dogmatic, binary, tribal approach versus now, what is the difference there? Because the neuroscience is the same, right? Like you still the concepts of here's what happens when you get triggered, here's what happens when you flip a lid. Like those concepts are the same. But in
Well,
one,
but whenever you see another person as an other, or whenever you view another individual as a threat, then you are flipping your lid. That is still true, but whenever we are asked to see other people as a threat, or whenever we're asked to see people as a danger, and that's we are being asked to see people as threats and danger. Like the way that we've been divided up into groups, all of us, doesn't matter which group we are in, but we are being asked and perceived to see the other groups as a threat and danger. So that keeps us in that lid flip state. Whenever we view each other through a dignity lens and we do not view each other as threats, whenever we recognize maybe there is some sort of like a fear response, but we have an understanding of, okay, is this a time for compassionate inquiry, or is this fear going to save my life? So really empowered humanity theory asks us to investigate those primal instincts that we have for survival, whereas the status quo relies on those primal instincts and gets us to live our lives from a place of fear, tribalism, and our susceptibility to groupthink. That's the difference. Is that model, that is what it is doing to brains and the duality of human nature, and empowered humanity theory is doing the complete opposite.
And I guess so for me, this whole concept of suicidal empathy that Gad Saad has introduced, I find that that's the muddied water that we have to be careful about because you can have so much compassion for someone's plight if all you're thinking about is this oppressor, oppressed victim, like as you said, grouping, where you can almost convince or it's done subliminally, right? Like that you end up actually ignoring those really smart impulses of fear that is actually you are threatened because now you're on the verge of committing suicidal empathy, right? So
Hmm.
how do we how do we teach kids to obviously see the world with that dignity lens, but not risk being manipulated by, which is what is happening, unfortunately, in the schools right now. Like I
Well,
see
but they're
it.
not they're not schools aren't teaching the dignity lens right now. Like they're
Right. Well,
not
but they're
we're
using
not
all those same words is my problem, right?
but
They're using
they're not doing it in practice, and it's obvious
right.
that it's not being done in practice. So if it's not being done in practice,
That's right. That's
you
what
know,
you got it right there, right? Because it's all about neurons that wire together, fire together. I mean,
yeah,
fire together, wire together.
yeah,
So it's what they're practicing is I'm going to group people based on immutable characteristics. I'm going to peg
yes.
you as yes, okay,
And whenever they do that, the neurons that are firing together or wiring together are the ones that are reinforcing our tribalism and our susceptibility to fear. So it's wiring the brain in a way that it's maintaining activity in that amygdala and cutting off the prefrontal cortex. So
right.
it is trapping people in their most primitive selves. And that was the thing that uh, caused me a lot of uh, panic, because I understood that that was the case, and that if we don't change, we are institutionalizing and normalizing chaos.
Yeah, my the problem is a lot of the people that you even quote in your book don't practice what they
I
preach.
know, I know, I
I
know,
mean,
I know. Some of my, that's the thing. Some of my heroes and people that I've really looked up to are not, their current practices are not congruent with that work. And I think that is something that's really hard about the world today, is being able to be grounded and staying congruent in what is right and what is healthy.
yeah.
So
Jason, if I could step in, could you give us a concrete, specific example of an instance where someone did not practice what they preached, so that we can kind of see it in all its splendor? What does that look like?
uh I will say a recent example is, I don't want to give the person's
Understood.
name, but one of my, maybe I'll say heroes, really somebody that really influenced my how I live my life, and really some aspects of empowered humanity theory. I heard that person giving a commencement speech, and they were celebrate this person is an older white man, and he was celebrating the decline and the demise of older white men. And there was a raucous clapping in the crowd. So I just saw that as we're celebrating the demise and the no more of a group of a population, and that ate at me. Also, my old working group, I used to work in the inclusion field, and I was essentially bullied on a daily and yearly basis because I did not go along with dogmatic practices. So I wasn't included by my friends and coworkers just because I was questioning these new ideas that the neuroscience and the psychology research say are not good for human flourishing, and it's just a political ideology, so to speak. So there's lots of incidences where people are not uh, living by what they
Could
say.
it
Well,
be
I
that we're
mentioned,
reaching a point where the chronic influence on the neural pathways has been so prevalent for so long that it's almost a question of an inability of the person to reprogram themselves, to rethink how they understand dignity and compassion and empathy and values. Could it be the case that the problems with tribalism and fear and groupthink as a way to understand the world has become so ingrained that anything counter to that, the mind almost becomes allergic to it? That
Hmm.
EHT becomes like something that people are allergic to. Could you expand upon that?
Uh, yes. So I will say I had spent roughly before I had the language of empowered humanity theory, I had the ideas behind it. And those ideas started around 2017. And from all the way up until 2021, I tried to get those ideas into my working group in Austin to, just to have conversations. Because my original plan was I could share this with my team in Austin, and then we can stop or we can change the trajectory of social and emotional learning so that it is this neuroscience, human science centered, apolitical, non political, just a framework for human flourishing, and that's it. That the neuroscience says, yes, this works. So I faced heavy resistance. Like it was really odd the resistance and the hatred and the disgust that I was treated with. But then in 2021, I began to publicly try to call attention to what was going on and try to change what was happening in our society. To start a movement, if you will, that was just based off for human flourishing and humans working together and trying to figure out things together rather than seeing each other as the enemy. And what I was encountered with was hatred from the quote unquote anti woke people. Just as my colleagues describe themselves as they use the word woke, but I've faced resistance from them, and I faced heavy resistance from those that were pushing back against that ideology as well. So I think the allergicness of EHT is politics.
Mm.
And Diana, as and I had this for later, but we can go and move into it now. But Diana, also one of your big questions at the end of the last episode was, what are the limitations of this work?
Mhm.
And my answer is politics.
Mm.
And I have had the privilege of being a non-political person my entire life, even though, Wink, I found this out about you, but I also have a undergrad in history and political science. But I remained non-political because I understood that the basis for the quote unquote conservative viewpoint is that humans are inherently like not good people. And the basis for quote unquote liberal pol- politics is that humans are inherently good. And both of those political philosophies build systems and policies and structures based off of those two assumptions. And that puts people into these tribal categories, uh, and they're in tribal categories on false pretenses,
Hmm.
because the thing about empowered humanity theory, this its non-political framework, is that it recognizes the duality of human nature, is that we are hardwired with these primitive, protective, barbaric features, and we are hardwired for compassion and understanding and the ability to see each other as we see ourselves. Uh,
The two
but
wolves.
yeah, yeah, the two, I mean, that is the reality of our nature. So the best thing that we can do right now is abandon our political attachments. And if we want to unite around some sort of political thing, then we can unite around just voting out the incumbent for the next several election cycles. But really, it's politics, and it's our political attachments, and our political assumptions, and it's the way that we've demonized each other and the other that is really it's the breaking point of empowered humanity theory. It's
Jason,
the
that's so
reason why it
wise.
hasn't been able to break out beyond the noise.
Jason, that's so wise. I mean, to me, part of the problem is tribes and warring factions have an interest in the universe becoming political, the entire universe, because then they can play divide and conquer over the other. I was on a podcast with a very influential podcaster. You all would know his name. We were talking about something, and he wanted to know my political um, stance or position, which I thought in his world kind of made sense because he has a definite political slant. But I said to him, well, there's a lot of life before politics. There's humanity before the political. That's how I kind of think of it, is that you are human with all that entails before you become a political creature. And he looked at me with this sort of stunned look, as if that was something he had not really heard from the panelists before. My sense is we're so swept up in these warring waves of fear and political tribalism and politics is that we forget the common sense that before the political, there is the human. And
Yeah.
that's really where it all starts. And we should spend much of our time and focus on discerning what exists in that pre political humanity, as opposed to deciding once the political door is closed, well, then how do we divvy up the power and the interests and the factions? So I've always thought that if you kind of view these issues from a purely pre-political lens, you can avoid a lot of the needless distractions that arise from politics. But that's very idealistic. I can afford to be idealistic. I'm not, someone out there, approaching school boards and what have you. But I do think that the more writers and scholars, intellectuals can make the case that the real frontier, as in Star Trek Enterprise, to boldly go where no man has gone before, that place really is the pre-political. That's where humanity resides. That's our home for the human condition. And that's which is why your work so resonates with me, because it's almost as if every paragraph, I kid you not, every paragraph, there are probably 3 to 5 references, words, understandings that just resonate with me. It is as if you are you're almost like a hermetic tone. You're kind of linking into what really brings alive humanity, what really brings alive the human condition, human nature. That's it. That's it, Jason. So many of these people who believe in the neural pathway games of tribalism and fear, it's because they believe in the world of the political life that it's all about social engineering. We
Hmm.
can, from on high, impose reality on these mere creatures, these items of our device. So kids are not seen as living, breathing entities, but rather molecules or atoms in service of the greater narrative. But that's the
Yes.
problem. That's the problem. We're not atoms. We're not molecules. We're not faceless robots in a classroom. We all have our loves, our joys, our passions, our heartaches, our sorrows. We have our families, our memories, our churches, our neighborhoods. We have times when our hearts were broken with prejudice and bigotry, and times when our hearts
That's our
sang
humanity.
with the, that's right. That's
That's
right.
our humanity.
And so if we can just kind of beat the drum and explode the wonder of humanity in the pre-political, I think that would help us. That's
I
what I
think
think.
it's a dam that is bound to break,
Mm,
because
mm.
there is something within all of us that yearns to be human and
Yes,
yearns to want to
yes.
connect with each other. So as soon
And
as
that's
these
pre-political.
yeah,
That's before the political life. Yeah, yeah.
as soon as these artificial walls start to fall down and crumble, that's when things are going to get really really fun and really amazing.
What is it called? Preference cascade, I think, something like that.
Jason,
Just my thoughts.
I was thinking that throughout our discussions, we've mentioned social emotional learning, but we haven't really talked about it. For example, why was social emotional learning curriculum developed? Why was it introduced into the K through 12 school setting? And I'm wondering, since you were an SEL specialist in a school district for a number of years, I'm assuming you know that history. Um, would you be able to at least give us a little bit of background information on why was it developed? Do you know by whom? Was it some committee or something? Was it Department of Education? What who
Uh,
was it? And then what was the intention? Was it like we need to do this because children aren't learning this at home? Like, why did we need to teach social emotional learning to children in schools when they could get it at home or in their worship communities or in other places?
I think it initially, and I may be wrong here, so internet, please.
Be
But I
kind.
bel I believe
Yes.
that Daniel Goleman's work with emotional intelligence spurred Daniel Goleman and some of the others with Castle, the Collaborative for Academic and Socially Emotional Learning, is the organization that SEL came from. I've heard conversations that it was put into the system with nefarious goals, but the reasoning is, I guess naturally. So we are naturally social emotional creatures. That's one of the things that the SEL critics and just people in general think, that SEL is just this thing that happens in school. No, we are socially and emotionally learning and expressing 20 well, every waking moment. So that is one thing to be aware of. And I guess, schools did think that, if we teach children how take a breath, recognize their emotions, be able to say, I am angry or I am sad, or learn how to self-regulate. Those are very good and effective strategies to know. So, and how do we not be hateful to our friends? How do we learn to work together so that whenever we have a group assignment, each person is being responsible and we're being kind to each other? Those are important things to teach. And I guess, with in the past 50 years, with the breakdown of the church and the family unit, I guess all of those skills got outsourced to the state. You could you could say, I guess, with the need to do SEL in schools. I'm not saying that that's something that I agree with, but it just seems that's the natural progression of why are we not doing it in church or in the home? Well, because those two institutions aren't really what they used to be.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people think that this is something that's new, like newish, like maybe
Hmm.
came about in the 2000s, but it was actually in the mid 1990s when I think Castle um, was created, and so it's been around for quite a while. And but then there was a shift, right? And the shift
Right. Well, there
happened
was a
in
shift in
2020.
2020, but also it really wasn't until 2012 that Castle really got into to the school systems. So it is pretty new to be widespread and common in most of our schools. But yeah, in 2020 it shifted to transformative SEL, which is just now done through that collectivist political lens. And I'm not sure where they stand, what they're doing these days.
Yeah, you're not sure if there's been any awareness of how that shift may then have created what Diana's been talking about that's happening in the schools more recently, especially
Hmm.
in the schools where her children are.
Well, what I saw and see is that SEL is framed within a power lens, right? So that is incompatible with a dignity lens. Because when you have a power lens, you're automatically denying somebody's dignity, right?
Right,
Right,
right.
right.
So,
And that's the mind shift, or the mindset shift, that the EHT lens
but here's the
brings.
pushback to are we beyond this work in this moment in time? Because a lot of people, when I push back, right, and try and take it from the neuroscience lens and and really the dignity lens
Hmm.
and to the pushback I get is, but that's not reality because we live in a society where power is everything, right? Systemic this,
Right.
oppression that.
Well,
Right,
and the
right.
way that I answer that question is, I only have one life to live, and I'm going to choose to live my life through that EHT lens. Like, the way that I see myself and the way that I see others is going to be through that lens. And I know that that is good for my well being. I know that is good for my relationships. And since I know those things, I'm going to continue to advocate for EHT and spread that message with others, because
Jason,
it is,
you just want great neuroplasticity for
yeah.
your brain. That's all you want. That's it.
So,
Well, and
we
Diana,
can, some people do, they spend their whole lives angry and fighting against something, and mad at the world or mad at
It's
a
true.
group of the world. And some people really like that. And some people don't care for that. So I'm just hoping to reach Well, I would like to reach everybody, but I would really like to reach those that want to live their life, their limited time on this mortal plane, loving themselves, loving each other, not seeing people as threats and dangers based off of what the exterior is telling them, and not be trapped in their primitive selves.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah, I
things,
think
Jason, that go ahead, Sander.
well, it's when somebody's retort is, well, but we live in a world with, with a power structure as such. Well, that's a worldview, right?
Yeah.
But what I've learned over the years is that people don't understand that they've been um, taught a worldview that they now are espousing. They think this is just the way it is, and it's like, no, that's a lens.
Mm-hmm.
You've been taught to view the world through a particular lens, and there are other people who have other lenses, right? And so the worldview makes a difference to understand, like, and where does that worldview come from? What's the influence, right? Is it Marxist Leninist? Is it like, what is it? Is it Freudian? Like, what are the worldviews, right? How do we see the world? Is it through our religion? Is it through our culture? And so to be able to just say to somebody, to be able to articulate, well, it sounds like your worldview is influenced by yada, 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 and my worldview is influenced by such and such and such. And therefore, we're not able to see the way in which each of us are experiencing the world because we hold different worldviews, and we don't necessarily understand each other's, or I understand about your worldview and my worldview and other worldviews. Do you understand about other worldviews, and do you understand what has influenced your worldview? Because it's not the way the world is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's why I refer to it as the EHT lens. It is a lens for viewing oneself and viewing each other and how we interact. And that's the lens I operate from, because I've fortunate I never had developed that political lens. So I don't have those neural pathways. Uh but yeah, it's just a lens, and it's one I developed for myself, initially, just to deal with the things that life was throwing at me. So it's not even something that I created, like, okay, let me see if I can make this thing to see if it will be helpful.
Jason, one of the things that I noticed, and I don't think you really talked about it in your book, if you could take just maybe a minute or two and address this issue. I've read from two or three sources, and I've also shared this with Diana previously. There seems to be this interesting, actually, in one of our previous podcast discussions, there's an interesting difference between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere and how they kind of perceive the world. So, for example, I believe the left hemisphere is prone to binary thinking, uh, this or that, whereas the right hemisphere seems to be more holistic, seems to be more contextual, seems to be a greater aficionado of nuance and complexity. You need all kinds. So you need all hemispheres of your brain to be a complete human. But I wonder if there's something there that would further your EHT theory, or maybe not. Any thoughts on
So,
that?
yes, and I think one of the small things that I write about is that Dan Siegel's work points to the number one indicator of well-being is an integrated brain. So when the right and the left hemisphere are more integrated,
Mhm.
and the practices that build awareness and equanimity, the mindfulness practices, the aspect of empowered humanity theory, actually increases the thickness of the corpus callosum,
Ah,
which better connects the right and the left brain hemispheres. So that's just an example of some of the neuroscience that supports EHT as a valid framework for well-being, because the more frequent the hemispheres are in communication with each other, the calmer and the happier that we are. And I guess an example of where I've used that was one of the schools that I was working with. I was walking in the hall, just doing some observations, and I encountered a child in crisis. Ran out of the classroom, and this is, I would say a third grader, somewhere second to fourth grade student. But he was crying and in hysterics, and he was just completely frantic. His teachers were trying to get him to calm down, and like nothing was working. So I just walked over, a safe distance from him, and I said, "Can you name?" I said, "If you could just do me one small favor." I said, "I know you don't know me, but just look around and see if you can name 6 colors." And by the time he got to his second color, he had completely calmed down, because what I had done, I was getting him to integrate his brain. I was
Mhm.
Because he had so much activity in that right hemisphere. But whenever we're bringing the logic into it, it's integrating the brain. So that's just an example of how important an integrated brain is in the moment, but also in our daily lives, because that's anxiety and depression is whenever we have too much activity in one of those hemispheres.
So when someone replies to Diana and says it's about power analysis, you don't get it. Maybe what that person is lacking is an integrated brain, because there's more to the world in reality than power. But they've been trained to only think in that way, that limited way.
So
Yeah.
how do we because if they're not going to do the work, I mean that's the problem here, right? This work requires an individual to actively practice.
Mm-hmm.
And if an individual is perfectly happy, they don't see anything wrong with dividing people based on immutable characteristics and,
Yeah.
pegging.
They can live
So,
that life.
right. And and this is where, where my struggle is that if there's way more of that, people who basically have convinced themselves that the entire world is about power and I have to be either, looking at it from an oppressor oppressed lens and always, bowing down to the supposed victim, which is where that suicidal empathy comes from, right? You start
Mm-hmm.
self-flagellating. It- there's less of us. So I'm
Yes,
Yep.
like,
yes.
I'm like,
It's
there.
like 99 Dianas. There's 99 other people who don't have the nuance and complexity thing down. There's one Diana who's like questioning. So like, well,
And the rest are literally paralyzed by fear because they may see that, oh, I don't know if everything is about a power lens, but they're not in a position, they're still,
it's groupthink.
Right.
It's
yeah,
belonging. Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Yes.
I feel like I've put together and articulated empowered humanity theory in a way that just present it as a neuroscience based framework for well-being, that while also presenting what is being taught now, or just normalized, the in vogue ideas of the day are impairing human flourishing. And those are not my opinions. Those are the realities of what is happening. 7 years ago, some of the criticism that I got was, well, sure, we want that one day, but, and they just stopped at the but. So if 7 years ago a neuroscience based framework for well-being would be good enough, eventually, like, when do we start, would be my question and my pushback. Well, if that's what we want, when do we start? And am I supposed to adopt these practices in my own personal life that I know are detrimental to well-being and keeping me trapped in my primitive brain? Do I really want to be trapped in my primitive brain and be hateful and fearful to people that I don't even know? You know, those
Yeah.
it's a complete mind shift, and it does require people to be open to the idea of not hating someone because of the way they look, vote, or believe, you know?
So here's a challenge. You're on a podcast with Nick Fuentes. How do you use this work? I mean, this is the reality that we live in, right?
Oh,
There's people
wow.
out there that
If that was, I would, my only honest answer would be to listen to what is happening in the conversation and really try to seize what is being said in that conversation and steer it to a that dignity, to
well, but he believes that Hitler was right and that we just need to finish off the work that Hitler started and get rid of whatever last Jew there is. I mean,
He
this
says
is
this
the
in
re
person, in
he
public. He says
he
this in
says
public.
this in public, right? So, I mean, this is my point is when and it's not
well,
just
I
him.
would say, getting rid of a group of people is never a good idea, and it is never going to solve anything. Just like there's people like, if we could just get rid of all of the white men, or if we could just get rid of all the Jews, or if we could just get rid of all of the black people, or if we could all just get rid of all of then all of our problems will go away. That is a primitive way of thinking that humans, that's been the trap forever. Uh, Eventually there's going to be people that choose to live their lives not like that, and I know that throughout time there have been people that chose to live their lives not like that, but now we have the ability of more of us to choose to live our lives to not to hate people based off of those qualities, and we choose to not let ourselves be trapped and enthralled by that fear and hate.
You know,
So Diana, when you are aware of this podcaster who makes those kind of statements, what's your emotional reaction? How do you kind of process that?
I mean, the first couple of times, obviously I get triggered, right?
Yeah,
Because it's
yeah,
like, oh, you want me dead?
right. That's it.
I mean, I feel the same way where, people don't believe that Israel should exist. Oh, you want an entire nation of people just to
Yeah.
disappear. Like, what? So, but after a while, it's just noise because I'm like, you're just spewing hate, and this is all part
Yeah.
of a hate movement. And it's still scary. But because I practice EHT, lots of breathing, lots of grounding, I can kind of just oh, oh, it's almost like I'm ignoring it, right? Like it goes through
Yeah.
me, through my
Yeah.
ears, and doesn't
Yeah.
really get processed anymore because it's just noise. But when, you know, I'm in a line and consciously aware that someone is looking at my Jewish star and maybe they're wearing some clothing representing the annihilation of my people, it's hard in that situation. I mean, I do feel fear, so ignoring those signals would be the stupidest thing that I could
Right.
Sure.
do.
No, and I'm not you, Diana, but there's also another way you can look at that, which is someone might see you in line and notice your star David and look upon it fondly, as it reminds them of certain favorable neural pathways that they've accumulated over a lifetime of friendships and associations with those who are Jewish. So it might be the opposite. It might be a sense of affinity, affection, not
Oh,
fear or hate.
for sure, because I've had
Yeah.
people come up to me who are afraid to wear their own stars and
Ah,
say thank you because
yes.
you're giving me that um courage to, to wear it. But yeah, like the saddest part for me is that when I was growing up 15 years ago, I didn't think twice, or 15, much more than 15. No, but I'm saying like about 15 years ago is when I started, like, really actually not even. It was like the last 5. I never
Mm,
thought about the Jew. It wasn't a thing.
wasn't
Like,
a thing.
right? And this
Yeah.
goes to Jewish consciousness, Black consciousness. Like, it
Yes.
is being fed into us to
Inject it.
inject it.
Like we're good AI models. Train that model, inject that stuff into the neural pathways, the neural networks.
I'm glad you brought up AI because that was going to be my next question,
Thank
actually.
you.
Oh,
Yes,
but
Can I?
yes,
Xander
please.
first. Xander
Yeah,
first.
before we go on to AI, your question about how might EHT work, live on a show with somebody like Nick Fuentes, and it reminds me in either 1985 or 1986, I listened to one of those call-in radio shows. They were very common back then.
Right.
And a woman, I forget her name now, but she took random calls from people with all kinds of questions and concerns. And this guy said, this was again 85 or 86, and his comment was something like, um, I think we should round up all the gays and kill them so they don't spread AIDS around the world. And I was like, oh well, now, at the time I was like, oh my God,
Right.
and this interviewer, this call-in show host, this is what she said to him. She said, how do you propose that we do that? And he started to, we could, and he gave some kind of answer. And she was like, well, I mean, there's so many people. I mean, how are you going to find an island big enough to, you know, take them all too? Because he was something like, we should put them all on a deserted island somewhere, and they'll just die off naturally.
Right.
It's like, well, how are you going to identify the island, and how are you going to get them all there, and how are you going to locate all of those people in our society, right? And so eventually what happened is, I don't know if he realized it, but I think everybody listener realized, like, he was just talking in himself into nonsense, right? Because, but I would imagine that his expectation, his assumption was that she was going to say something like, well, that's a terrible thing to say, or you're a terrible person for saying that, or something along those lines. But when she said, how do you propose to do that? There was a bit of a silence because, well, he hadn't thought it through. He was just calling in to make, an outlandish statement. He wanted to fight with someone,
Mm,
right? Um, and or instigate something, or just get his views or ideas out into the public. And I think the way she handled it, it's like I put that, it was like a seed that was planted in my brain. And I thought, if I'm ever in a situation like that, regardless of the topic, I hope I remember to handle it in that same calm
mm,
inquiry way, right? Was it compassionate? I don't know. Maybe it was. I believe she was a psychologist. Maybe like a Daryl Davis, she doesn't like the ideas, but she's treating the person like a human being,
Mm-hmm.
right?
mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it's sort of like when confronted with people saying outrageous things, when you ask that question about Nick Fuentes, my immediate first thought was, I don't really believe that he thinks those things to the degree that
Ah,
he's stating them. It's just probably getting him a lot of clicks and
clicks.
attention and maybe
Yeah.
donor dollars and
Right.
invitations to go speak. But I
It's a
could be
career
wrong.
move.
I don't know him, but there's something in me that says, similar to what Jason was saying, is that we all have this inner drive, unless we're, psychopathic or sociopathic. I think we do have this inner desire or drive, based on our neurology, right? That says we want to belong. And the more outlandish you get, the smaller and smaller your belonging community gets,
Mm.
that's not going to work, for most people. So, yeah, I mean, I'll probably never meet Nick Fuentes, but I guess I might ask him, like, well, how do you propose to finish the work of Adolf Hitler, right? Right, like
Right.
let's get it out there. Like, just put all your craziness right out into the public,
Right, 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 right. So, Diana, what was it that intrigued you about AI? I'm intrigued that you're intrigued.
Well, because, you know, this work really is based on human interactions. And so
Yes.
how do you then, because so much of the reality today is in this virtual space, which
Yes.
I am not in at all. My mom called me this morning. This is so off topic, but I just have to
Go right
explain
ahead.
how, like, this is my coping strategy. She's like, "Have you seen TikTok? Your daughter's on there. You need to go look and have a talk with her." And I'm like, "I don't have TikTok, Mom. Why do you have TikTok?" I prefer ignorance is bliss when it comes to some of this stuff because that's not a world
Right.
like I don't live in this, you
Exactly.
know, world. But the reality is many people do, and that is where we're headed. And how do you bring this work into that electronic virtual
Well,
space?
Yeah.
interesting you asked because about a week ago I did just such thing. I created an AI model informed by empowered humanity theory. It's a customizable. It's on Chat GPT, so all that subscribe to Chat GPT. It's called the EHT Companion, and I built it primarily around the book and the workbook, and it is there to serve as a teacher, about the duality of human nature and some of the neuroscience of well-being. It is there to help guide people through issues and problems that they may be having through that empowered humanity theory lens. It's there to help coach and guide people that want to develop the EHT lens for themselves. It ended up with so many capacities. I ended up writing a Substack article, just kind of explaining what all the EHT companion can do. So yeah, that's something. It can also write lesson plans for pre-K through 12 and
Uh-huh.
incorporate EHT into existing lesson plans. There's an image creator, so if you want to create some like mindful coloring sheets based off of empowered humanity theory, you can. So yeah, I've
So,
already stepped into that arena.
so first of all, we need to make sure we link that to this
Yes.
episode.
Yes.
But can you give some concrete examples of how that all works? So, like, if I'm a teacher and I want to do a lesson on, I don't know what's a controversial thing.
Can can we put a pause here and can we edit this section out and I'll go get my phone and I can ask it right here and that could be part of the conversation?
Sure, let's pause.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Exciting. In real time. So I'm just wondering, is this the secret way past the political gatekeepers for Jason?
Yeah, I don't.
I don't
Oh,
know. I don't know how it works. Maybe, maybe not. I mean,
yeah, I actually, I mean, the
does
couple of times I used ChatGPT was to create some poems. So I'm very naive
I
because,
have the free
rhyming.
version of ChatGPT, so but I,
yeah.
I I know a therapist that has a whole curriculum, and they created a Chat GPT thing where
Wow.
you can go on their website, and it's for parents, and they can ask questions and they get responses based on, they linked it to like every podcast they've ever done, every blog post they've ever written, every sort of like like paper that they have on the topic. And so this ChatGPT thing that they have, I don't even know if it's ChatGPT. It's just an AI
Right.
platform. It pulls from everything they've ever said or written to respond to the questions that parents have, and it goes back and forth with the parent.
That's very powerful. That's very
Yeah.
powerful.
Okay, so Jason, go ahead.
Uh, I'm gonna ask it. I'll say I'm going through a challenging time. Can you can you help me out through an EHT lens? But also, Diane, was there another question that you want me to ask it?
No, let's start there. But it's more of how would an educator use this AI tool using your framework to approach a controversial lesson in a classroom in order to really foster the compassionate curiosity to have a honest conversation,
Oh, great.
stimulating critical thinking skills as opposed to what's happening now, which is this is what you this is how you should be thinking. Right?
Right.
Like,
Right. Right.
I want to try to capture. I want to try to get that into a question so I can ask it.
oh,
Oh,
I
okay. I'll give
Because
it a stab. Uh, Mr. or Ms. AI, in the California mandatory ethnic studies class that I have to take as a student, I am being asked to address the question to compare the life of Harriet Tubman to the life of an alien in the US. How can I answer that question in a way that's faithful to EHT and free of caricatures and stereotypes?
hey, EHT companion. So I'm a teacher in California, and I have to teach a lesson on Harriet Tubman, comparing her to a present day alien in the United
Yes.
States,
And you can
like
say
a
illegal alien, undocumented alien. Yeah.
illegal alien in the United States. And how do I teach that with following California's ethnic studies law with balancing the EHT lens?
That's a profound task you're taking on, and it's important to approach it with care. Let's draw from the EHT lens to help you. First, using the dignity lens, you'd focus on the inherent worth of Harriet Tubman and the modern day person, affirming their humanity regardless of legal or social labels. You can guide your students to see the courage and resilience in both without diminishing the struggles or legal realities of either. Second, a value-centered identity encourages students to reflect on their values, freedom, justice, compassion, and see how those values were embodied by Tubman and how they might guide their views on today's marginalized individuals. Third, foster a compassionate, inquisitive mindset by asking students to explore the stories behind people today, just as they do with Harriet Tubman, and to approach both with curiosity rather than judgment. Under California's ethnic studies law, you can emphasize the shared humanities, struggles for dignity, and the resilience of marginalized peoples, while avoiding any narrative that dehumanizes either group. You're helping students reflect on systems of oppression historically and today while focusing on agency and dignity. You might even ask students to write about their own values, how they can show compassion, and how they can uphold dignity in their communities. It's about seeing how the values embodied by Tubman, like courage and care for others, can be lived today, even in complex situations.
Something I note, as my readers on my Substack know, I have a mission in life,
So,
and
as
it
you
is to
weave this
oppose
lesson,
dogma and slogan words. So I heard a wonderful presentation and help until I heard the phrase systems of oppression, quote unquote.
Yeah, yeah, I heard that too.
What does that mean, Jason? What does that mean?
It's not something I put in there.
And I think that raises an
Those,
important question.
yeah.
well,
Are certain frameworks, certain dogmas and slogan words being injected into AI platforms, regardless of the intent of the quote unquote non woke creator or founder?
no, that was straight out of the California framework. That because
Oh, maybe that's the problem for me.
that's the no, because well, that's the problem with the framework.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
The
right.
yeah, it
California,
referenced that framework.
Gotcha.
exactly. They are
Exactly.
injecting it into our schools. So
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally California law, although it's not mandated because it hasn't been funded, but
Right.
the schools are now adopting this framework, which literally injects this ideology.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
let me show you this. Here's a couple of other features on here that I really am hopeful that people will use. Hey, I'm going through a really tough, challenging time right now, and I'm wondering, can you show me some guidance through that EHT lens?
I'm here with you. Let's a nice deep breath together. You can place a hand on your heart if it feels supportive. Let's think about your value centered identity. What's one value that's really important to you right now, even in this challenge?
Gratitude.
That's beautiful. Even in difficulty, that value of gratitude is like a light. So maybe ask yourself, what's one small thing you can appreciate about yourself right now and how you're facing this?
How funny I am.
I love that. Your humor is such a gift, even in tough times. That's resilience right there. Let that gratitude for your humor be a reminder of your dignity. You are facing this with your own light, and that's powerful.
Okay, so actually, I'm feeling much better now. If I want to really develop my empowered humanity theory lens. Can you provide exercises and help keep me on track and help me develop that over time?
Absolutely, I would love to. We can set up practices around your value centered identity, your dignity lens, and your compassionate, inquisitive mindset. For now, how about we start with a daily check in? At the end of each day, ask yourself, did I live aligned with my values and how did I honor dignity in myself and others? We can build from there.
So that's how I'm incorporating empowered humanity theory into this AI world. And really, what I'm hoping is that we can use AI to accelerate the awareness of our humanity
Hmm.
before our humanity is lost. And in my Substack, I talk about how the AI revolution is the revolution that's going to define this century, but the humanity revolution is what's going to define its soul. And I'm racing and hoping to ignite the humanity revolution using this 21st, maybe 22nd century technology.
Jason, I'm going to take us a little bit further towards the future. There used to be an old show called The Jetsons when I was a little kid
Yeah.
with a robot. And okay, you remember that. Kind of a futuristic show about robots and computers in our lives. There are some people, some researchers. I'm thinking of AI researcher Cameron Berg out of Yale College, Yale University, who believe that as they try to align AI with safety, with human interest, uh, that there might be during the training and the relief, and depending upon the particular prompts, some flickers, some sparks of quote unquote consciousness, although they would use the term self awareness of existence. So this is a very far-sighted question, but I figure why not devote a minute or two to sample it. If the point came in time when a frontier AI system or large language model was demonstrated to have flickers and sparks of consciousness, would your framework be as applicable to those alien entities? But it wouldn't be empowered humanity theory, it'd be empowered alien or artificial theory.
Well, I think it would just depend on how they are wired. Like we are wired with a duality and the ability to strengthen whatever we practice over time, and we're always practicing over time.
Mhm.
So if they have that same duality and the capacity to grow either one of those, then it definitely would be applicable. But perhaps they're wired in a completely different way than we are. So applying that tool to them would not.
And you still might have the problem of political gatekeeping in the world of
Yeah,
AIs.
yeah,
Who knows?
That's the thing. Garbage data in is
Garbage
garbage data
data
out,
yeah.
out.
right? And that's
Right.
my concern is, I mean, obviously I know you, Jason. I trust that you have humanity's best interests at heart. Um, but I don't know other models and other agents, right? They're called agents.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
Well, and
and
that's why in the book I reference all of those all that historic wisdom, so really in the book we talk about all of the historic wisdom that supports all of the attitudes and all of the practices and how the neuroscience validates those things. So the truth has been here for a really long time. It's just that now the neuroscience validates that historical wisdom, and essentially EHT just packages and articulates some of that that ancient wisdom in meaningful and pragmatic ways. So yeah, there's always going to be people that are hateful, that want to be dogmatic, that want to be part of that, but I'm really hoping to spend my time and energy on this planet, sharing a different lens and a different worldview, and hopefully people will find it attractive enough to say, yes, I want that in my life, as
I,
well.
I have the answer, Jason and Diana and Xander. I have the Silicon Valley answer. We all need to start a VC fund, a venture capital fund, get about, I don't know, 1 billion, $2 billion, get a top ranking team of AI researchers and developers and trainers, and basically replicate the neural pathways of Jason. Train the AI, Jason the AI, and then just release them to the world. And you would have a dependable, trustable AI, according to Diana's concerns. And the world would be a beautiful place.
I bet in 10 years that'd be a possibility.
It's interesting as you were going through that demonstration with the AI program. It reminded me of conversations that are coming up a lot around, can AI replace therapists?
Mm,
And it turns out that there are a lot of young people that are using AI technology for emotional support. And so they're asking questions. And there's some really good information that they're getting, but there's obviously some issues with AI being able to recognize and how to respond to suicidality, for example,
mm,
in appropriate ways. But this is a topic that's coming up not only just within the mental health field. We're actually going to be having a presentation on it coming up in January for the Mental Health Professionals Forum at Braver Angels. But additionally, Braver Angels debate team recently did a national virtual debate on the topic of AI and mental health.
Hmm.
And so people
mm.
might be interested in looking that up. I believe they record their debates on video and put them up on YouTube, but they'd be able to find them at braverangels.org. But so this is coming up because what was happening is you were saying, I'm having a difficult time right now. What could I do that comes from the EHT, theory? And it was doing something that a mental health coach or mental health therapist, well, why don't we slow down? Let's take a breath
Mhm.
together, put your hand on your heart. Like that's something that's a common thing, right? That's something that we teach people to do, to how to tap into their parasympathetic nervous system so that their sympathetic can calm. We don't talk that way because that's outside of the language of most people, but that's what put your hand on your heart and take a deep breath is,
Yeah.
I talk
right?
that way with
I
my
know. I mean, so
patients.
do I, because that's the work I do. But generally speaking,
Yeah.
it's
So how do you
but
feel
yeah.
about that, Xander? I'm curious, like, how do you feel about an AI taking over some of, or, I mean, I still don't think they can replace humans.
I don't
Um,
think so either. But I think maybe it's you know, acupuncture can be complementary to allopathic medicine. Perhaps this is a similar thing that um, a well-tuned, if that's the proper way to say it, AI emotional support program can be complementary to psychotherapy or psychoanalysis or even mental health coaching, because the AI platform is available 24/7. The clinician or the coach is not,
Right.
right? But they have to be better tuned to be alert to the possibility of helplessness and hopelessness that then sends a signal to an actual human being, maybe to follow up with that person or to get on the line, because that helplessness and hopelessness can, um, be a red flag for something more serious. But I don't think they're going to replace therapists, but I can tell you, I have talked to about three or maybe three, four individuals very recently who felt that the information and the support they got from a back and forth with an AI um, platform, it wasn't ChatGPT, that they feel like they they got more information that improved their own well-being in a really short period of time compared to months and months, if not years, of psychotherapy. So
Wow.
that's really interesting. I
Wow.
also talked to somebody recently who said
Wow.
that when they were a teenager and they were thinking that they were bisexual, everybody around them was telling them that, oh, no, you're not. You're just gay. And just you should accept and embrace your gayness, and you're not bisexual. Nobody is. That's not a thing. And he would go on your standard internet search engine trying to find information about bisexuality and are there books I can read? Are there people I can talk to? Are there things? And he would get some information, but it still left him with this concern like, oh gosh, maybe I am gay. Like maybe I'm just trying to kid myself. And then when AI started to come out, it was, this was just in the last couple of years. He's a younger person. He used AI, again, not ChatGPT, another one. And the information he got about bisexuality um, put him at total ease,
Oh,
right? He spent like almost a decade struggling. So
wow.
there are some like because he
Wow.
wasn't going to go to therapy for it. It wasn't something that he needed psychotherapy about, but he was starving for information that didn't come with that bias. And or the other lens, which would be, you're a Christian, you can't be a bisexual, right? That was the other thing, right? So it's interesting what it can do, what it can't do. We don't know all the limits yet, but I'm I'm not opposed to it, and especially seeing the demonstration of the EHT version of that, even with the systems of oppression addition in the language, I think it was coming straight from
Right.
the California law, and so, but you have to be very careful to be paying attention to know that EHT isn't advocating that, the law is, right?
Right.
And
Right.
is that clear? The pace of the speech pace was rapid at some points, and the tone of voice changed a little bit, and so that consistency in the tone and the pace of the speech could lead people to think that EHT was advancing this notion of systems of oppression. So that'd be the only that, but that's a computer, right? So something can be done probably to sort
Right.
that
Right.
out.
You can
Yeah.
fine tune
but
it or insert. Right.
I do have a question because so when our first episode got published, it came with the essay that I wrote on the sanctity of life. And one of the things that I write in there is that, you know, I would say the collective we here, but um, the framework of EHT is based on that life is precious, right? We're here first, and that we need to sanctify the dignity of each human life. But there are cultures that, you know, really honor martyrdom and
Mm-hmm.
glorify death. And that is antithetical to this. So how do you bridge that, and how do you like where do we go from, when you're faced, I'm not articulating my question very well, but I don't see how I can be speaking with someone who has a completely different set of values and still be able to, have this isn't the Nick Fuentes, like I may be, brainwashed about. This is like literally like my core value is honor killings, because if you just, honor
Yeah.
me,
Well,
then you
if
deserve to die. That kind of
yeah,
mentality.
if that was, I mean, I would just make sure that I live far away from those people as I possibly could. I'm,
But that
and
could be your next door neighbor. I mean, they're literally my next door neighbor
Or it could
because
be
I have
your grinder hookup or whatever, as we discussed.
well,
right.
if I knew that, then through the EHT lens, what I would do is, if I mean, obviously, if they're my next door neighbor, I feel like they're probably, if I knew for sure that they were not going to kill me and they did not want to kill me or my family, I would do everything that I could for that person to recognize and see me as a human being.
Yeah, but they don't. I mean, like
Well,
the bottom line. So I'm actually curious how the AI EHT would answer this. That's what I was trying to
oh,
get at.
okay,
Like,
okay.
you know
Jason,
what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
do it
if
for
my
us.
neighbor doesn't see my dignity and really believes that I am lesser than, and with a lot of extremist
Mhm.
religions, that's literally what it is. How does EHT, how do I engage with a person like that?
Let's find out. Good question, Diane.
Hey,
Really?
how do I engage with a person that does not see the dignity in me? And yeah, so how do I engage with that person if they don't care about me and they don't see the dignity in me, and even if they wish me harm? How do I deal with them through the EHT lens?
That's incredibly hard. And it's so important to keep your own dignity in focus. The EHT lens invites you to anchor in your value centered identity. Remember who you are no matter how they see you. With your dignity lens, you can affirm your worth internally, even if they don't. And from that place, the compassionate, inquisitive mindset helps you respond with curiosity. What's their story? What pain might they carry? But always with boundaries. You can choose to engage or step back, knowing you don't have to accept harm. Your dignity is yours always.
Okay, what else?
Another powerful practice is to come back to your breath and body. Maybe try that 90-second emotion reset from the EHT workbook. When you feel that person's disregard, give yourself a moment to feel it fully, let it pass, and remember your strength. Then you can decide how you want to respond or even disengage with dignity and self care.
Okay, thank you
It's
very
not bad.
much.
It's not bad. And I think on one-on-one that does work, right? Like that, setting my own boundaries, removing myself from a situation that absolutely, and that's why this work really is to help empower the individual. Um,
It's
but
it's a
it's going to
s-
take, mhm.
it's a slight shift, but it's a radical change.
Yeah.
It's a radical way of seeing things differently, but really it's really just a slight shift, because I believed most people want to and think that they are operating from that EHT lens, because people throw around the word dignity, and people throw around the word compassion, and people throw around the word kindness, and people throw around the word open-mindedness. But most people have a group of people, some of them with the political lens, there is half of the population that they've decided to hate. So One invitation would be to let go of the hatred of others, especially if that idea has been conditioned by media or an education system that has taught us to hate a certain group of people, or some people are good and some people are bad, rather than all people are whole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, this was incredible. I mean, this whole series, just being able to be in conversation with Wink and Xander, and now having you add your wisdom, I'm just so grateful for the experience and the opportunity. Um, I'll let you
Feel the
guys.
same way. This has been invaluable from start to finish. I mean, I feel that in many ways, the things I've been doing all along have a firm basis in good brain health, good neural pathway health. And maybe that's the way to market this, is that you want A plus brain health, go the EHT way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Jason, for including me in this opportunity. Um, it's yeah, it's similar to Wink. It's like it's a validation that the work that I do is not woo-woo,
Yeah.
right? It's based in neurology, that well-being isn't some nice thing that is being offered. It's no, it is the thing. This is a life-saving focus. It really is, because it's as simple as, if we cannot regulate our circadian rhythm, our life is going to be unmanageable, and it can lead to all kinds of psychological and social and physical issues that deplete, our ability to live our lives fully. So it's not woo woo. It's not something out there, and I think it's been framed that way for a long time. Right, when we focus on wellness and well-being, like, well, isn't that nice that those people have the time and money? And it's like, no, it doesn't take any money to get a better night's sleep, right? This takes focus and effort and prioritization. That's what it takes, right?
Right. And Xander, just the thing about our psychological well being is Richie Davidson work, and I point to this in the book. It shows that our well being is a learned skill. Just like riding a bike and driving a car and speaking a language, they're learned skills. Our own psychological well being is a learned skill. And the more we practice, the better we get. And the three pathways of practice, those practices were selected because those are the three things that we can do with intentional practice and habits that actually strengthen the neural circuitry linked to our well being. So, the idea, Wink, of promoting EHT as a framework for good brain health it's based in reality and fact, is that it's based in the neuroscience of well being.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing it to us. Thank you for bringing it to this world. And I just hope more people, learn about your work, engage with your work, and let us have a better humanity.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Here, here.
Thank you all so much.
Take care.